All right, perfect. Well, Phil, thank you for doing this and welcome to our group. We'll have more, I think more people will be piling in here shortly. Um, they have the option to ask you questions through the chat. I'll either ask them directly, or if you see them, you can respond to those if you want to. So you're the, obviously, as a sign behind you, that your head's in the way, but you're the proprietor and of something called the Carnivore Bar, which I've had, which is quite good. But before we get into that, Phil, I know you have a background, a military background, I believe. Go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me on the podcast. But the thing is, I was a combat medic. I served in Afghanistan in 2011, and I hated the food. And in fact, the experience got me really sick. So there's a lot of different factors at play that got me sick, but it's meat that got me right. So huge gratitude to the carnivores who've been spreading this way of life, way of eating, and way of healing. And I owe a huge debt to you and the whole rest of the community.
Yeah, and obviously anybody who is not living under a rock right now, as Afghanistan is squarely in the middle of the news once again after, really last 4 or 5 years, you really haven't heard much about it other than an occasional snippet. And so as we exit in a very ungraceful fashion, a lot of people have been critical of that, seeing the Taliban now, basically handing over, billions of dollars of equipment to those guys. They were not particularly the best actors in the world, as I can recall some of the taking some care. As a medic, you've probably seen some of the. I mean, war is never going to be pretty, but I mean, it seems like we had extra levels of depravity that occurred. I took care of some very tragic little killed children which were tortured and injured by Taliban members. And it's not that, like I said, war is bad on both sides, but it's sad to see that, and I don't know if that has been something you've thought about or considered, as we're seeing this stuff play out in kind of real time here, and what's to come, what's going to happen to the people that were left behind. I mean, in my view, they're going to be, they're going to share an equally horrific fate, for the people that they, are unable to allow to get out. So. Sad to see. So talk about the food. I mean, where were you at? I mean, I was at Bagram, which was basically the largest facility, and I was there as basically doing trauma surgery. What part of Afghanistan were you at when you were there?
I was in Kandahar, so I was a little bit south. We operated a lot out of Kabul.
Right.
We didn't go there. We didn't live there, but we resupplied there, got our trucks worked on. I was in a striker brigade. So it's really disheartening to see what's happened. I think that the biggest effect, is going to be credibility. We just don't have a plan. And so I think that that's clear. And as that credibility is kind of threatened, it's, as carnivores, we're like, the USDA food guide pyramid, may work for some, it hasn't worked for us, so we're, barbarians to one standard, but it turns out the more standards that you uncover, we're working out wrong, our healthcare system badly needs updated, our food systems need updated, our foreign policy needs updated. It's a lot of these, things are just kind of showing their true colors. Is like, we're not putting our best foot forward.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We have two Afghanistan vets here talking about this stuff, and there is just an incredible. There's so many things that seem to be broken and broken in many ways, and I don't know how many people are concerned about that or interested about that, are going to continue to, allow, if that's even a word, if there is anything you can do to allow or disallow this. But it does seem highly flawed and frustrating and problematic, and can anything be done about it? Well, let's talk about the food aspect of it, because obviously You're producing a product that, is, well, tell us what the Carnivore, tell us what you've got there. What is the Carnivore Bar?
So, this is basically it. It is modeled off of pemmican, and it is 100% designed to solve the problems that I encountered in Afghanistan. There was a lot of sugar, nicotine, seed oil, and crap. So the way the government does food is that they have a spreadsheet of RDA vitamins. And it doesn't matter if those vitamins or minerals are bioavailable or digestible whatsoever. They're dealing with the spreadsheet. So they just pack in a bunch of stuff, and their guiding principle is nostalgia. So they're satisfying the bureaucratic requirements, and they're making a taste to home, but they're not satisfying the nutritional requirements of soldiers on the battlefield. So I said, we've got to do better at this, because when I sent, we had access to the internet, and we occasionally could order things, and they'd ship them overseas for us. So I ordered things that I thought I would need, and one of the things that I found lacking in my diet was red meat. But in the summer heat of the desert, you get these cycles where it's really, really hot during the day and then really cold at night. And these heat cycles would pull out the moisture from jerky that I had sent all the way from the States to Afghanistan to the end of the world, and it would condensate on the edge of the bag. And then it would spoil the whole bag. It would sour the whole bag of jerky that I had sent over. And it's like, wow. So here's all this military might, all the missiles, all the gadgets, all the gizmos, but we still can't get healthy food to the other side of the world. So to me, I was like, well, I got to fix this. But when I came back, we were still doing keto, paleo. I hadn't heard of a carnivore yet. And so I was still kind of floundering. It's like, well, I guess they did their best. But carnivore kind of switched that gear. It's like, well, turns out you can survive off only meat. Not giving any medical advice, that's the way that everyone should eat. But for soldiers, we care about what you can survive. Like, you're performing mentally and you're strong, good enough. So if you can perform off only meat, then if you can make meat shelf stable, then you can win. You can win wars. You can bring healthy food to the battlefield. You can explore different planets if you want, survive a disaster, a hurricane, power shortage. It's like, once you make that leap, that meat is healthy and that it's an important part of your diet, the remainder, the missing element is the shelf stability.
Yeah, and I think when we were, before, say, World War I, I think we were actually still using pemmican to some degree in our military troops. I think maybe Civil War. I can't remember if it was Spanish-American War, where we're still using those things. But this isn't new. I mean, it's something that, believe it or not, most people don't know this, but Ansel Keys, who's been vilified for his positioning on cholesterol, was in part responsible for the K ration, which was what we fed the troops in World War II. And that was based on, we think we need X amount of this vitamin, mineral in these little rations, which the troops uniformly hated because it was just, awful food. But prior to that, and anybody who's familiar with pemmican knows that the Native Americans were the ones that sort of developed it and used it. And that was their war food. That was their travel food in many cases when they went on these long, month-long journeys and hikes and the type of thing. That's how they managed it. Because it was, talk about the, because at least the traditional pemmican, my understanding was it was, basically stable and it wouldn't rot, and you could have it for 10 years and it was there. Is that, what is the deal with what you have? Is it shelf stable? How long will it last? Do you need to put it in the fridge? What's the story on that? I think you're still muted. Did you get muted again? Yeah, I think you, I don't know why you got muted. You might have to unmute yourself.
Sorry,
Okay.
I hit the button. So yeah, that's a great point. Pemmican is the food that it's based off of. So Native American tribes made it to travel. So they're hunter-gatherers, or hunters and bad hunters. And so they were going and moving with the herds, especially across the Great Plains. So the herd would travel like hundreds of miles. So they would graze that area intensely and then move to the next place and give time for the soil and the grasslands to recover. And that was just part of this ancient cycle that the Native Americans lived in harmony with. But if you were traveling and moving your camp, you know, it's not an exact science where the herd is going to go. You may not score meat at your final destination. Like, so you need meat for the journey, and then you need it, you know, for a few weeks, but it's really labor intensive. So they wouldn't eat it every day, but for traveling and for bad times, they'd always have a reserve of pemmican because, you know, that's what you needed to stay alive. You needed something that would have all the branched chain amino acids and all the essential fatty acids and the fat for energy. So if it's not nutrient dense and energy dense, it's not a survival food. And that's, you know, that's kind of part of the problem. You know, Ansel Keys, you mentioned, responsible for the K ration, they did do a study against pemmican. And so Ansel Keys was in charge of, you know, no conflict of interest there, doing a study on pemmican, and they basically assassinated it. They set up the troops that were supposed to try to go pemmican and didn't keto adapt them. Just went from normal standard American diet, which was different than the standard American diet of today, but just transitioned them to keto without electrolytes. And they weren't able to absorb that much fat all at once. It's a very high fat food. So they had all these soldiers in keto flu stages of, they lost all their salt because ADH, when you go on a keto diet and you drastically reduce your carbs, you lose a lot of your salt and you have to replace that, at least initially. So when he put all these people on this really, really keto diet, like 80% of their calories from fat, they all bombed, and then they had them go out and do hard labor. And I think there was a very short study, less than a month. I think it was even, don't quote me on that, but I think it was just 2 weeks. And all the soldiers were weak. They hadn't adjusted yet. They were put into performance tests, and obviously they failed because no thought was given to the transition whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just looking at some of the history of food in the military, and one of the things that they were talking about was, you know, as we pointed out, there was A rations and B rations and C rations, and then K was named after Ansel Keys with the K in his last name. But they were talking about the fact that Nikita Khrushchev was amazed at the development of Spam seemed to be responsible for the Soviet victory over the Nazi Germany, and saying that you know, having that canned meat available was something that allowed them to, you know, basically fight on. And, you know, and, I mean, there's a lot of things that happened back then. But so, you know, as far as, like I said, your actual product, is there any, I mean, how long will it stay? Do you have any thoughts on how long you can keep it? It doesn't need to be refrigerated, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be refrigerated. So any true pemmican doesn't need to be refrigerated at all. So it's a Native American food that's made in the 1700s, probably for eons before that. We just don't have any record of it. So it is rendered fat. So you take the fat trimmings from the back of the animal or by the kidneys, the suet, and you render it down into tallow. And then you take the strips of lean meat, the leaner the better, actually, and you dry it, they sun-dried it, and so they took all the moisture out of it. Then they took a mortar and pestle and broke it down into this like fluffy, just broken down, just pure protein of the muscle meat that had been dried, absolutely bone dry, like blow it away. And they took that and they mixed little balls of pemmican. And then they put that in a rawhide bag, sewed it up, and then sealed it with tallow. And that would keep the oxygen out. So those are the two big threats, is moisture and oxygen. So you can make your own pemmican. There are tutorials. I think I'll probably upload one too. But that's the name of the game. Without moisture and oxygen, it should be shelf stable. Rumor has it of 50 years, but we are not using mortar and pestles. We're using, commercial kitchen, professional equipment, trying to do it as big a batch we can to get it extremely, extremely dry without, burning it to death or destroying the nutritive value of it. And then getting all that moisture out and then sealing it in a metallized film. So this film is actually really crucial. You can see that this film keeps the moisture and the oxygen out. So that is a critical step in making pemmican. If you are going to make your own for just in case scenarios, not only is it a ton of work, it takes us about a week to make a batch of carnivore bars, but you also have to be extremely careful, measure your water activity constantly, and then you need to put it in a container that's not going to just let it reabsorb the moisture and get exposed to oxygen and acidify, because those fatty acids will at being exposed to oxygen, they will start to degrade. Saturated fat less than, say, fish oil or omega-3 or the PUFAs that are more vulnerable. So it'll take longer, but you still got the same basic problem that you want to be able to seal it away. Ziploc is just not going to cut it. So immediately there's just massive amounts of advanced physics and chemistry when dealing with the carnivore bar, just trying to make a food for, people like us who don't want a bunch of fillers and preservatives and crap like they are having the MRE that would make people sick.
Yeah, and also, obviously, and I don't know if that's by intention, but this is opaque. There's no, a lot of people will put stuff in either plastic containers or glass jars, or like you said, Ziploc bags. Is there any benefit to avoiding light? Because I know, like in the freezer, meat that's exposed, it'll change color, it'll oxidize, with that, and turns different colors. Is there a benefit for not having the light benefit hitting it?
Well, there's two or three different issues. So light, yes, it is a very especially sunlight is a complex composition of different levels of radiation. We all hear about UV radiation, sunscreen argument, or vitamin D creation. So UVB is also degrading to plastic and meat and whatever. So some things are not rated to survive consistent radiation bombardment. If you ever leave a children's toy outside, you see it get all sun bleached and then start to become brittle and weak. That's the same kind of UV degradation. So you want to keep things, especially food storage, away from light and excess heat. That's why a lot of places say cool, dry storage, but we actually put ours in, if you want, we put it in an ammo can, just because I'm a combat medic, because that's where I kind of got the idea, we'll sell you a whole ammo can for it. But that's actually not only good to keep it away from the light, water, moisture, because it has another rubber gasket. The bullets have the same vulnerabilities to water and oxygen that tallow does. So they actually have a rubber gasket, but it also keeps out predators like other mammals, like rodents, really, really like the carnivore bar. Cats and dogs really like the carnivore bar. Like, they know what it is. They know that it's the means to sustain life, especially for mammals. So, keeping it safe from predation and also keeping it safe from the elements is really key. And when we think about a wrapper, we don't really understand all the science and technology that goes into these. Like, there are thousands of different permutations of different chemicals, some safe, some not. some that are food safe, but wouldn't be appropriate, you know, under our paradigm of thinking. So, you know, if you have a wrapper, that doesn't mean that oxygen isn't permeating through it. They all have different rates of transfer for moisture and oxygen. So a lot of care has to go into the rating for any kind of wrapper or barrier. So light and a whole host of other things are potential vectors for destroying your shelf-stable food.
Yeah, I think that's why we see so many preservatives and other things in the food products, and so you know, some people prefer not to eat those. Hey, what about because you mentioned tallow or rendered fat? I remember we had one of the winners of the TV show Alone, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but one of the things he pointed out was, you know, he had killed a bear, and it, you know, kind of, no, it wasn't a bear, it was a moose, and he had a lot of meat, but the wild animals first try to get his fat supplies. They went for the fat first, which was kind of, you know, it makes sense. It has most of the energy if you're looking for just calories. So what is the macronutrient composition of the carnivore bar? What is it? You know, can you talk about that, or is it fairly consistent, or you try to make it consistent?
Yeah, right now we're the anatomy of the carnivore bar. It's a image on our website is like 37 grams fat, 17 grams protein. But there's a little bit of an error bar on those. It's roughly, you know, 17 to 20 grams of protein and 37 to 40. But, you know, that's basically 80% of your calories from fat. So by volume in dried meat, it's a handful of each. So it's 50-50, but dried meat is completely compositionally different than fresh meat, wet meat, because there's a huge amount of water, you know, in the meat. So when you get dried meat, if you ever wonder why jerky is so expensive, it's like because you're eating like a giant slab of meat that's condensed into a tiny little bag. So the amount of vitamins and minerals you're getting, you know, is disproportionate to how mechanically full you might feel. But, you know, as jerky companies, especially the big ones, use a bunch of chemicals, soy, wheat, sometimes sugar, as hermectants to keep it shelf stable for a little over a year. They're doing that because they have a high moisture content. The moisture content is designed to make it palatable so you don't chip a tooth, because our weak jaws, you know, aren't equipped to handle like real jerky that's actually been dried all the way. So they dry it about halfway. And so they make it moist enough that you can tear it into without any effort. But that means that it's vulnerable to microbial decomposition. So with the carnivore bar, we have really, really extremely dry, just peerless as far as dryness is concerned, but it's mixed with tallow. Now, both of these things you wouldn't want to eat by itself. Like dried meat would be like cinnamon challenge. You see people coughing, it's like too dry. And then rendered tallow often increases motility, which is the polite way of, you know, cleans you out. But if you combine them together, it makes something more palatable and energy dense and nutrient dense and shelf stable for an incredible amount of time. So we would say probably we're wanting to prove about 25 years shelf stable, and it's good for you. So, I mean, that was what I needed on the battlefield that I didn't have.
Yeah, and how many, and so that bar is, you know, it's not that big. How many calories are in that little bar there? Just out of curiosity for people who are looking for, you know, like hikers, they're like, they don't want to carry, you know, there's a lot of people that go backpacking, and you know, most people aren't going to be deployed, fortunately. But, you know, for those people that are going to take it as a, you know, I can travel with this, I can go out in the woods for a couple of days. It doesn't take up a lot of space per calorie, right?
It's 400 calories. So it's 200 calories per ounce. It's extremely satiating. So you don't need very many. If you're eating about 2,000 calories a day, I think it's like five bars. So for 5 bars, 2 ounces each, you know, you're talking 10 ounces. It's very, very light for the amount of energy. So for through hikers, people have been fascinated by it, because you could take this and you could lower your pack by, you could half your food allotment of weight. So the more weight you carry, the more food you need to carry, because you need the energy to carry the weight. But it's a horrible cycle. Like, you carry more weight, you need more food weighs more. So it's like, how do you win this equation? It's like, you need really to eliminate any kind of bulking agent like fiber or water, and carry as much water as you need, and just have your food component isolated. And that's where you get a lot of those opportunities. Like, preppers, for example, would say you need of grains like corn, wheat, any kind of bean, pinto bean, and like oatmeal as your fourth. You'd have 750 pounds per person per year. Now in carnivore bars, that's 250 pounds is your yearly amount of calories. So in 2,000 bars would keep you alive for a year. So if you put that into perspective, like whatever you're trying to do, whether it's prepare for a rainy day or go to Mars, that is 2/3 reduction in your weight, your density, because a lot of that corn and, bulking agent fiber is not really doing anything for the nutrition of the human being. It's just, it's more economical to use a filler because meat's expensive.
Yeah, and one of the things, there's a couple of questions here. People are asking the shelf life. You said you think maybe it might be 25 years. I know you have a couple of versions of this now. I think you've got a couple different flavors. Talk about the taste. Talk about the different options for what you have.
Yeah, so we're coming out with 2 new versions. We're doing a high protein version. So one of the biggest complaints from people, especially who don't eat this way full-time or are carnivore-ish, is that the tallow is a bit much right off the bat. So it's a lot of tallow, 80% keto macros. So some people like a little bit less. So we do a high protein, which is basically half the fat. And then we are, trying to expand and trying to get into different markets. We are doing one with a little bit of honey. So we try not to be dogmatic towards any people who want to do natural whole food ingredients. Honey was the pill I could swallow. Like I like 0 carb, but I could do a tiny bit of honey. We only do 3 grams. And we also do grain finished, and we also do grass finished. So grass fed, grass finished. A lot of the paleo folks only want to hear grass fed, grass finished, a regenerative ag, as I've heard you talk about, Sean, all the time. But also, with the caveat of eat the meat you can afford. So I'm a huge fan of all of those sentiments. It's like, that makes sense. It seems reasonable. And, I admire that philosophy, and I'm trying to mimic that.
Yeah, somebody's asking about the wrapper. Is it waterproof? If there's a flood, will it hold up to that, you think?
Yeah, it's very, very waterproof. So there's a ORTV and an MTV. So it's the moisture transfer rate. It's 0.004 per 100 square feet per 24 hours. So it is, the units on that are they're kind of confusing, but if you imagine a giant tarp of this material, you'd get 0.004 like milligrams per, theoretical 100 square foot. So, it would take a very, 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 very long time to even get 1 single milligram of H2O into the package, maybe even a couple hundred years. So very waterproof.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, we're at a time in society where people are not sure what's going to happen. There are people that are worried about food shortages, power shortages, zombie apocalypse, whatever, and I honestly, I can't blame people at this point. But what are you, I mean, do you guys sell it in volume? Is there a way to get, are you plan on making maybe a bigger serving size, or what are the plans going forward with the Carnivore Bar if you're able to do it?
So what we're doing is we are grassroots. We have 4 people in our company. So it is extremely difficult to make, and there's nobody interested in making it, principally because it is the margins on meat are too thin. So without passionate believers in this product, we wouldn't exist. So we have done 2 Kickstarters now, and people in the community have asked me to create this. Even Michaela tweeted years back that, hey, someone should make this pemmican stuff. And we are. And it does allow for you to travel. It does allow for you to prepare, but it's one of those things that's a labor of love. We wanted to scale up our operation so that we could lower the price, so that people could, stockpile this thing in case there was a real emergency. But beef prices went up 30%. In some places, certain cuts went up 60%. So, what to do about that remains an interesting question. We will keep prices as low as possible for as long as possible. But, making the one and only food we eat shelf stable is a daunting process, especially because we are not allowed to add any fillers or chemicals or preservatives in order to accomplish it. So everything that we do is mechanical. We can only use temperature, we can use heat, we can use cold, we can use machines to break things up. But as soon as industry professionals say, oh, just spray it down with this or spray it down with that or add a little of this, it's like that makes it pretty much useless for this community. It's like, so we're supported by these amazing, passionate carnivores who need this food to live their life the way they want to live it. But we're also hamstring, because this system is set up for giant conglomerated companies to just rule over all of the meat, control the prices at the disadvantage of the ranchers. So that is a pickle. We will do our best.
Where are you located again? What part of the country are you in?
We are in Columbia, Missouri. So we're centrally located. It's right in the middle of Missouri, which is the middle state.
Now, are you near, I think Greg Judy is out in that area. Are you familiar with Greg Judy? Are you familiar with him? I don't know if...
I'm not sure. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a regenerative rancher. I believe he's from Missouri. Somebody correct me if he's wrong. If not, he's fairly near to there. I thought he was from Missouri. But I'm just wondering, like I said, when it comes to, obviously you've got a couple meatpacking industries that kind of control most of the U.S. meat supply, which, again, that topic was getting a little bit of national traction during the middle of the pandemic when we saw problems with shelf supply was running low. People were talking about now. Obviously, everyone's attention is, our attention has been swayed to Afghanistan and whether we're going to have, mandatory vaccines and all this stuff. And so the eyes on that have gone away a little bit. But I mean, it's still a very important issue. And I don't know, like I said, if you've gotten how much you interact with, local ranchers or if you've gotten some support from those guys.
So we're between a rock and a hard place on taste, so the grain fed is easiest to make. So the grain fed is easy to make. It comes a lot more processed and our yields are lower. It's mostly water. When you get grain fed beef, it has a lot less protein per pound dried. So it's an interesting observation working with both materials, not paying favorites on any particular camp. But when we do grass-fed, local ranchers are really just not up to it because it has to do with genetics. When you dry something, you concentrate its flavor. And a lot of grass-fed farmers are in their nascent stages. So they don't have big programs. They're just kind of winging it, figuring it out, what they want to do. And that's great for your daily, food security. Know your rancher, like Shawn says all the time. So that's a really important step to support your local animal agriculture. But as far as making a product, people want something that's consistent, and they want something that tastes generally for most people good. So we've had to go with Joyce Farms, and they're out in North Carolina. So they create a very consistent product that prioritizes flavor over everything else. And they served a lot of the restaurants on the East Coast. But COVID probably shouldn't say the name, but has kind of shut down a lot of those restaurants. And so, they've had to pivot, and they've been put under a lot of stress. So they have enough material that we can scale up with them. So some of the local suppliers of beef, they couldn't do the scale that we need to be profitable. So it takes a week to make Carnivore Bar. So, we need to be making a bunch, otherwise it's not economical at all.
So when you say, it takes a week, what size batch are you making in a week, and what are the steps? I assume drying takes, I've made pemmican at home, and the drying was 16, 18 hours. And then, it was another, you cutting the meat up takes a little bit of time, and then drying it, and then mixing it up, powdering it and mixing it takes another hour or so. But what's going on during that week? Is it part of that is pot packaging? Or, obviously when I'm making pemmican at home, it's a blob. It's no special shape. You guys obviously have a very uniform shape, which I imagine there's something that goes in it. So what is the actual process from starting with the meat and getting it into the bar?
Sure. So we've gotten custom molds. What makes it square is we've gotten Chicago Culinary School of Mold Making makes us custom molds that make it square, so that we pour our pemmican into these silicone food grade molds that are heat stable. So when we go to make carnivore bars, we have to thaw the meat. We have to cook the meat, then we have to dry. So when we are making pemmican, we have extra steps to make it food safe, to match our HACCP plan. So our HACCP plan has to be, it's heavily regulated. So there's a lot of red tape when it comes to meat that favor big businesses over small businesses. So we have to reach a kill point with our meat because they're afraid of bacteria. So we have to reach the internal temp of 165, and then we have to dry it. But because we've just cooked it, we have to dry it in a way that uses very little heat, because otherwise we just burn it to a crisp. So the kind of pemmican you can make at home, keeping your meat raw, is, you're skipping a step and you're able to expose it to heat for some duration without destroying all the vitamins. You will lose some using different methods of drying, but then once it's dried, we have to break it up so that you can eat it. Because if we make just a giant, say we took a sirloin and we dried it just in giant hunk, you wouldn't be able to bite into it. So we're trying to adjust the macros without creating something like meat sand. Because the first versions, I think, Shawn, you might have tried one at CarnivoreCon. It wasn't the best. We've improved leaps and bounds since CarnivoreCon. Because it's a complicated dance between breaking it mechanically, again, because mechanically only, we cannot add chemical solvents, fillers, stabilizers, anything, otherwise it defeats the point. And because of that, we have also had all co-packers turn us down. Nobody's interested in doing food this way. So that puts us all on our own. So 4 people trying our very best to make it work with equipment that is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, as we scale up and our batches get bigger, we can bring the price down, presuming that the meat prices don't keep skyrocketing. I think what we're going to try to do now is keep our prices the same, just kind of take it in the teeth and do our best and ask you kind people to help out and, try to make up the difference in optimizing our process. We will try to do that for as long as we can. If we can't, then prices will go up. But there's, this product is worth more than its weight in gold. It's the ability to preserve human life. And us carnivores know that it's the business end of preserving human life. It's what some of us eat entirely, just this. So I can't emphasize enough how critical it is that we not give up and we do our best to provide this product at the lowest price possible so that carnivores have access to it.
Yeah, and I don't even think you need to restrict it to just carnivores. I think there's plenty of people that, want to have food. Like I said, hikers are going to hike. They may eat a variety of food, but this is a highly nutritious product that tastes good, that is, lightweight, stable, and it doesn't have all the garbage in there. And so, I think you don't have to restrict yourself just to the people in the carnivore community, although we certainly appreciate your efforts. And I think most of us want to support what you and others like you are doing. Let me ask you about, what's interesting, I didn't realize you had to cook it. Is that the same thing with beef jerky manufacturers? Are they required to cook their meat as well to a certain temperature?
So it depends on the process. We had our process independently reviewed. We had to hire out food scientists to validate our process and validate our food safety HACCP plan. So that was what they recommended. So we tried a whole bunch of different cooking methods. We even tried a giant air fryer, but it was prohibitively expensive, and we could only do 5 pounds at a time. So that was a dead end. Then we tried a combi oven, which seems to do pretty well. It's a specialty oven that uses steam, so it makes it crispy on the outside without making it dry. If you bake meat, just throw meat in the oven and, devil may care and just turn up the temperature, it dries out. It's gross. That's not a good way. To cook a roast so that you can eat it is not just like turn the oven up to 375 and, throw out a prayer. It's something that, you want to slow cook or you want to put on the grill or, take some care, smoke it, but how do you scale all those things up? And how do you scale them up in a food safe plan? So those kind of challenges to make something ironically juicy before we dry it so that it has the right flavor is one of those conundrums that you just come into organically, trying to attempt this endeavor to make a clean, healthy and nutritious food that is also shelf stable. Because with meat with no preservatives in it, if it has seriously no preservatives, like the Carnivore Bar, if you did it right, it should last forever. If you did it wrong, it should last 2 weeks. So without those chemical stabilizers, you really have a sharp learning curve, and we lost hundreds and hundreds of bars because of that.
Yeah, and and I don't. You mentioned there's a HACCP protocol or whatever. I'm not sure what that stands for. I'm sure it's something to do with food safety. But are you subject to regular inspection? Or I know with meat processing companies, they've got USDA inspectors on site pretty much every day, depending on the level. But what is the level of oversight that as a small independent producer, I'm assuming you're doing this probably at home, or I don't know, I don't know if you have rented a facility or where you're doing it, but what is the level of oversight that you're subject to?
So we are inspected. It's a little bit of it's a tricky road right now. So a USDA facility costs millions to do it the right way. So we are not to the size of that yet, but we also could not sell this product commercially if we were doing it in our home. So the whole scrappy doing it in our home kind of thing is we have to rent a commercial kitchen, and then we have to be inspected. So we're inspected by the health department currently, and that's currently signed off by the State Department in Missouri. So that is, you know, our little legal niche. We can't have, you might notice that there's no nutrition facts on the back of this thing. And that's for a reason. If you have nutrition facts on a meat product, it needs to come from a USDA inspected site because they need to approve that label. So I have my address so that you could mail me complaint letters in case there's something wrong with whatever I sent you. So you have access to me directly because I'm direct to consumer only. And that's the way we're structured now to stay legal, but also to avoid the huge fees that reward these giant conglomerate meat packing companies and punish all the small little butchers, abattoirs, farmers, ranchers, and the consumer, and put this big barrier between the producers of the food and the consumers of the food.
Yeah, so you know, like you said, direct to consumer. So in order for you to, you know, have your product appear at a grocery store, a gas station, or something like that, you would now have to go through USDA, or there would be some other step, right? Correct, regulatory step.
So we just moved facilities from a tiny hole in the wall to a rent-to-own actual professional kitchen with better infrastructure, overhead hood. It's already installed, floor drains, the whole 9 yards. We can convert that into a USDA facility, but we have to be quite a bit larger than we are now. So that's the barrier right now. And also there's kind of diminishing returns. If we make that big investment, yes, we could be on store shelves, but direct to consumer online sales are kind of up in nowadays because there's a lot less people going out and about. I think malls everywhere are pretty much dying. So getting it in front of the consumer as a advertising strategy is less interesting to us, especially now that the world is so weird. We're probably going to stay word of mouth like this and stay, you know, in the carnivore and low carb communities. Because I think that's where we've been getting the best reception, is where people understand the effort that we've gone to make it this way. And they appreciate it, and their understanding of, you know, all the difficulties included in it.
Yeah, and I you know, because you've been doing this, has been about 2 years in process now. It seems to be. I can't remember when you first started this. How long have you guys been going at this?
So we did the Kickstarter. It was basically a concept. I took I didn't have a wrapper. I had a prototype mold, and I printed out a black sheet of paper with our logo on it, you know, and I wrapped it around a square bar and said, please help me make this, you know, because as a carnivore, I felt like I was studying to be a paramedic, a civilian paramedic, and I had 12-hour shifts in the ER, and I was looking at the vending machine, and I was just ready to cry. You know, they had free cake, free pizza, and a vending machine with a Jack Link's bag that was this big. And I was like, with no fat. And I was like, wow, I'm screwed. I'm a koala here who only eats one thing, and that thing is in scarce supply. And so it kind of dawned on me, my military experience, my struggles with getting meat to Afghanistan, standing there in the ER, I was like, you know what? I could fix this. You know, I know what pemmican is. I bet I could figure it out. And so I launched a Kickstarter in 2019 and timed it with the first CarnivoreCon. And that's where I got to see you talk, Sean, and Amber O'Hearn and Michaela. And I tried to start from there. We got a couple tweets out, and the carnivores really liked the idea. So they funded us through Kickstarter, and we spent all of 2019 working on the process. And in 2020, about February, we finished delivery of the pre-order and opened for business March 2020. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. It's not a great start time, but people understood the value of it because of its shelf stability, and we sold out many times. So people were offering me whole Bitcoins. People were offering me thousands of dollars, and it was too late. Like, I could not make more of this product for any amount of money. So that's one of the dangers of not developing a product like this for a community of people who only eat one thing, is that, you know, it's not necessarily profitable. Big business is not going to jump on this. They're not going, if I go under, then that's it. So there won't be any pemmican that's commercially made. And if you have a lot of free time, it's no problem making pemmican. But the job I wanted to go into is to be a paramedic. You know, it's these long shifts. It's sleepless nights. It's, you know, carbs and sugar and nicotine, just like being a combat medic was. It's like, that's not going to work. I don't have time to make pemmican so I can go out there and make $20 an hour, putting myself in harm's way. It's like that, the math doesn't work out. Like, I need to sleep when I'm not on work. I'm not making pemmican in my kitchen every weekend. So I really needed this to work for any version of my life to continue, because, you know, I didn't have access to a kitchen where I could, you know, whip out an air fryer and just go to town.
Yeah, I see that. And just, I guess we've got a few minutes left here, Phil, but I guess I should ask you, you know, what sort of propelled you to try a carnivore lifestyle anyway? Was there health? I think we've got maybe your story on our website, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
But, describe just briefly, if you can, in the next few minutes, what was the impetus to go carnivore for you?
So, horrible anxiety, depression, kind of confusion, like where I'm going in life, lack of confidence. Just, you know, I served my country, trying to figure out, you know, where I should be aiming, what I should be doing. And so I had this crisis of meaning, and also just this horrible, you know, dysbiosis from Afghanistan. The doxycycline that they gave us for the anti-malarial, I was on that for the whole year. And I didn't get malaria, thank goodness, but it kind of wiped me out. And with the bad food and the preservatives, you know, I stayed wiped out. And the soldiers who disobeyed orders and didn't take the pill did the best. But, you know, I have a conflict there. It's like, well, this medical intervention was selected by qualified professionals who gave us a direct order to take it. You know, as a medic, I want to be adherent, but, you know, as an individual, it definitely set me up for some hardships. I tried every kind of diet imaginable, did a deep dive 10 years into the biochemistry, learned a ton of stuff. And when I heard about the all meat diet from you, Sean, on Joe Rogan, and Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan with Michaela, I watched them both, and I was like, wow. So here's a avenue I haven't tried. I tried it, and instantly I felt better. I looked better. I lost 40 pounds. I started getting stronger. I started being able to recover from my workouts. That was one of my big nagging problems, is I couldn't recover at all. I was just sore, just inflamed, unhappy, confused, you know, just wrecked. I couldn't function. And so this life has given me a new chance.
Well, like I said, I'm glad it worked out for you, and I'm glad it's given you this opportunity to do this. And I certainly wish you the best of success with what you're trying to do, because I think many people here would benefit from the product, quite honestly. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we've gotten some sort of affiliate or discount.
Yes.
With you, I think, with the MeatRx community. So can you tell us a little bit about that for the people that are part of this community? Or I should say MeatRx/Revero.health. I'm you know, I've got to continue to train myself to say Revero, you know, and we'll always be MeatRx at heart, but we're going to, like I said, for reasons of scalability and other things, and expansion of our overall goal, Revero.health. So tell us a little bit about what the members here can get as far as a carnivore bar.
Yeah, so we have a coupon code Sean10, so that we'd like to offer you in gratitude. So that is an affiliate link that you can get 10% off for anything that you want on our site. We're doing a limited release for the high protein and the honey bar, or you can get the original in ammo box if you want. So yeah, we just really thank you for your interest, and hope it can help.
Yeah, sure. Well, and Shawn, and just for you guys who don't know how to spell my name, it's Shawn. So I would assume that's on there because some people want to do the Irish spelling Sean, and so
Yeah, yeah.
I did not get to choose how my name was spelled, so don't blame me. You can blame my mom and dad on how they chose to spell it for those people that complain about it. But anyway, well, Phil, I'll tell you what, thank you for first of all, for being here, spending your time, and for making the product. Like I said, I've had it. I quite enjoyed it. I think they're actually quite tasty and they're great. I don't personally do a lot of snacking, but when I do, and certainly if I'm going to be like going on a plane trip, or if I'm going to be out hiking out. I moved up to Washington State. I probably will find myself going on day hikes and stuff like that when I get the opportunity. So that would be something that I think would go very good because I've gone and I've bought jerky before. But you always, like you said, you're always, you've got some amount of sugar in there, and sometimes there's soy, and sometimes there's who knows what else is in there. So it's great to have a pure meat bar. Because as much as I talk about, do what works for you. And I think that, and I certainly believe that what works for me best is straight up meat. I mean, I still, even though I sometimes will have some dairy and sometimes have some eggs and some other stuff, but I feel best on straight up meat. And it's great to have access to it, just a purely unadulterated meat salt. I think it's just salt meat, and, and that's it. And that's a great,
and we make it without salt too, if you want. And the salt we use is Redmond's real salt, because we know that carnivores are particular. Smart.
Well, and again, regardless of what you think about the different salts, I think the folks at Redmond are just good quality people. And I think that's just as much. I mean, I think when it comes to supporting companies, sometimes the products are equal, but sometimes the people are better, and you want to support good people. And I think you fall in that category. So happy to support you, Phil. And like I said, love to maybe get you. Let's have you come back in a year and you can tell us how you've doubled or tripled or quadrupled or tenfolded your business. I hope to see that. Okay.
That'd be great.
All right, guys. You guys have a great day. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Take care now. Bye, folks.